I obviously want to welcome in the legendary Hassan Radwan. We're not hearing you at the moment. Is your mic switched on?
Hi, can you hear me?
There we go. We can now. Good evening, sir.
Yeah.
How are you?
Hi, good evening. Can you see me as well?
No, just see your picture, but your picture is lovely. So we're happy with your picture. If you want to join with a live video, no problem, but your picture shows you very well.
Okay, no problem. Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm just going to kind of listen. I actually just happen to be free. I'm not usually free on Fridays. I'm just happen to be listening and just thought I'd join you, and I'll sort of chip in whenever you want me to. Okay.
Yeah, well, feel free if you would. I mean, obviously, we've been chatting about the 5 pillars and the 6 beliefs and so forth. And to whatever degree you have listened, maybe give us a couple of your views.
Well, you might find it interesting that I actually occasionally pray. I actually attended Jummah today.
Okay.
I do enjoy prayer. I like connecting with I'm agnostic, but I believe that there is something greater, and so I enjoy connecting with that, with the cosmos, even if there's nobody listening. Obviously, I know that I'm just talking to the ceiling or talking to the sky or whatever, and there may be nobody listening, but I just like kind of unloading and sharing my thoughts and my feelings and my pain with the universe, and I find it quite comforting. And I've spent 50 years, half a century, as a Muslim, and so I do find the whole Islamic prayer ritual quite comforting. I grew up in a very loving Muslim family. I never had problems with Muslims, and my experiences with Muslims were always very good. So I didn't reject Islam because of bad experiences. I rejected Islam because I eventually came to question many of the things that were in it. But
that's exactly somebody in the chat is saying the same thing. This is why I always, what you are doing sounds more like meditation than
yeah.
But Hassan, do you actually follow any of the Muslim rituals itself, or when you are praying, are you doing it in a very different way that just looks to the outside observer like you doing what Muslims do? How does that, if you're able to?
I kind of avoid. I like to, for example, I once gave a khutbah at the Inclusive Mosque, and I don't know whether you've heard of the Inclusive Mosque.
I think you did mention on one of the other hangouts. It might have been with Viz or something like that.
They're a very liberal.
Is that the Dr. Taj Mosque?
Sorry?
Is that the Dr. Taj Mosque?
No, I don't. I'm not a big fan of Dr. Taj Hargi. I find him a little bit dishonest, to be honest with you. No, this is the Inclusive Mosque. It was started, I think, in America by a lady called Amina Wadud. And they've got a branch in England, and it's just it's in Upper Street in Islington, actually. And basically, you can go there. You can be Muslim, or you can be atheist, or you can be Jewish, or you can be Christian, and you can join in. You can join in the actual ritual prayers, or you can just sit and watch, or you can lie down, or you can meditate, or you can just stand. And it's just a kind of it is an interesting. They're a lovely bunch of people, actually. Really, really nice bunch of people.
Do you get to talk to them as well, like a bit of a polite version?
Afterwards, there's always a nice. They lay on some food and some sandwiches and tea and whatever, and we get to have some really interesting chats. I didn't actually go down this Friday. Actually went to the one that's just around the corner because of the horrible weather. I couldn't make it all the way to Upper Street. But that's where I would go if I did do Friday prayers usually, because it's a good atmosphere. And I actually gave a khutbah there once, and of course I was very selective about the verses that I chose. The ones that I felt were very sort of inclusive and universalistic and ecumenical, if you like. And I avoided, for example, there's a prayer at the end when it says, sort of God help us and God protect us and this and that. And then it says, help us against the unbelievers. And I decided to cut that bit out because I'm sorry, I don't subscribe to that. So I think I do kind of tailor it to myself. Yes, and when I actually pray, it's a kind of like I'm connecting to not the Abrahamic God described in the Quran or in the Bible or anything like that, but to my sort of vision of some sort of cosmic power, some sort of force that's beyond this world, that may or may not exist. But I find that it alleviates my thought that there's something other than this miserable life.
Yes, so it's more, I guess, from what I hear, it's more sort of comforting. It's a feel good. You wouldn't necessarily come in and argue the point that in fact exists in reality, even though you might believe it, which I respect. So if somebody says, hey, I believe X, I can't prove it, I'm not going to try to do it, but it does help me in my certain way.
Absolutely.
And it doesn't impact the world around me in a negative way, you know.
Absolutely.
And especially if they're not coming to have like a tough intellectual discussion, because then obviously you could ask the question, well, do you care what is true? But if they have in fact said up front that, hey, I just have this belief, I don't know whether it's true. Yes, I want to care whether my beliefs are true, but I don't ultimately know whether it could be true. And they're not going to try and push it on anybody, you know. And I mean,
well, as you know, I am very harsh in my criticism of Islam, and I take many of the verses to task, and I say quite clearly and unequivocally that the Quran is a human text and a very flawed text, and it's got many things in it which are simply unacceptable, in this day and age, and I, so I am a constant critic of Islam, but nevertheless, it's, if you like, the tradition I grew up with, and so I still feel a kind of I want to connect with this sort of something other, outside, something greater than myself. And I wasn't born in the Christian tradition. I wasn't born in the Hindu tradition. I wasn't born in any of the other traditions. So they're unfamiliar to me. This one is, is the one I'm familiar with. So it's the one I feel more comfortable sort of using, if you like, as a vehicle.
Yes, and I think the two things that I just... Sorry, Stops, carry on.
Do you still have...
We can't hear you. Try. Don't mute yourself, Stops.
Do you still have heaven and hell?
No, I don't believe in heaven and hell.
I think the question was, do you still fear heaven or hell?
No.
Obviously not, then, if you don't believe they exist. No.
Not at all.
Fair enough.
I think, I mean, I've said many, many times, I think hell is the most obnoxious and evil concept ever invented by man. And
especially in Islam, yes.
Absolutely. I mean, the Quran, more than any other holy book, describes hell in the most graphic and sadistic manner in many places. It sort of, took the idea of hell and really developed it into this grotesque, awful place, which is absurd. But I mean, this was one of the main reasons why I came to reject Islam, because it's, they talk about there's no contradiction in the Quran. Well, I'm sorry, but there's the greatest contradiction between a God who calls himself merciful and a God who tortures. Mercy and torture are probably the greatest contradiction you could ever have.
Well, of course, Hassan, they would counter that by saying, hey, the people deserved it. They had free will, they were told, they knew what they could do. So no, it's not that God's bad, it's humans that are bad. That would be their response.
I mean, that's nonsense. I mean, a punishment should be proportionate. And if God is just, then his punishment should be proportionate. And if it's true that disbelieving in Islam is a crime, which of course it's not, then but let's just say, for argument's sake, that disbelieving in Islam is a crime, then the punishment should be proportionate. And eternal torture is obviously disproportionate. It's obviously excessive. But then you've got a God who calls himself the most merciful of those who show mercy, who therefore must show an exceeding amount of mercy over and above justice. Now, if proportionate justice, if hell is not proportionate in the context of justice, then without doubt, mercy, it's not acceptable within mercy, because mercy is obviously something you show to enemies. It's something you show to people who have committed crimes. And so it's absurd in any kind of sense or reason or logic. There's no way that anyone can defend torture and mercy.
No, well, I agree with you, and I think the entire judgment thing is just, not only is it immoral, it's irrational. The God, this perfect God that created these creatures, knowing exactly what they would do and how they would fail, and then punishes them for things that don't actually affect him. The only thing that we could ever affect is our fellow human beings and our environment. So he's beyond that, and therefore, you know, completely immune to anything, and presumably can't feel bad unless he chose to. So again, you know, it's just
exactly. And what was
you have a response here, Hassan? Just to say, you have a response,
go on.
Which you might not have seen. Apparently, according to one Muslim here, you left for emotional reasons.
No, I mean,
where you have just elucidated very clearly and logically why you left.
I mean, that is ridiculous. Again, it's often brought up, oh, that's emotional. No, I'm sorry. Religion is an emotional attachment. It's religion that is emotional. I mean, it's, as I say, mercy and torture are a complete contradiction. That is a logical, reason to reject it. That's not an emotional reason. It's a logical reason. You can't have a God who is all merciful and the most merciful of those who show mercy, and who tortures forever, eternally. It's a complete contradiction. As I say, it's not even justice. But if we forget justice, it's not. There's no way on earth it could be mercy. So it's absolutely ridiculous. And if you think about it, like you said, a God who creates a creature, knowing he's going to fail his test, in inverted commas, and end up in this place of eternal torture, which they're going to suffer, their skins being burnt off over and over again without end. A God who keeps them alive, who doesn't allow them to die, but keeps them alive so they keep on screaming in agony, not for 1,000 years, 1,000,000 years, 1,000,000,000 years, but forever and ever and ever. What is that all for? Just so that he can prove and say that he was right? He created them for what reason? I mean, if they say, they say, oh, God created you, so that's it's for your benefit. Well, what is the benefit for those people who were created that God knew that they were going to end up in hell? What did they benefit? There's no benefit there, and certainly no merciful, no being who calls himself merciful would create creatures just so they could suffer eternally.
I think this point can be put even more strongly, actually, because when you it's not just that the Islamic conception of, under the Islamic conception of God, he knows what's going to happen. He also has a degree of responsibility over what happens, because he determines your genetic makeup. Yeah. He determines where you are born, when you are born. He determines the, he is in control of the environment to a certain extent, and he's also in control of structurally the way in which we live our lives. And what I mean by that is there are certain sins attached to certain behaviors. So, for example, if you steal food, or if you commit, there's obviously lots of sins associated with sexual conduct as well. And the reason why those sins are even possible is because we are, quote unquote, designed to, in the example of food, to eat, rather than, I don't know, like plants, obtain energy from the sun through photosynthesis, or when we don't reproduce, we reproduce sexually rather than asexually. So if God exists, he has structured our lives and the way in which we physiologically operate to make certain sins possible. So it seems to me that not only does he know what's going to happen, he has a certain degree of responsibility over what's happened. So it's like he designed the video game that he himself is playing. Yeah, which I find
absolutely
just contradictory and perverse.
Absolutely, and the more we find out about how the human brain works, the more we find that our behavior is largely conditioned by our environment, our context, our socialization, our upbringing, and our biology. And what freedom we have is at best limited. And I can't understand how anyone can attach any blame to anyone who looks at Islam and says, no, I'm sorry, I don't believe in it. You know, it's, as I say, it's not a crime. It's not, you know, people who don't believe in Islam are not evil. And of course, what a lot of Muslims will say is, oh, but they know it's the truth and they willfully and maliciously reject it, which I find an absolute nonsense as well, because, you know, why would anyone who knows something is true then say it's not true? Such people don't deserve punishment. They deserve mental health care.
Yes, they just, well, depending on who you speak to, we're just suppressing the truth. Just suppressing, you know it in, you know, deep down, because we're supposedly all born with it, but we're just suppressing it so we can get on with our evil deeds. You know, that sort of response. Yeah.
I mean, it makes no sense. Why would someone, you know, do that? I mean, even if we were to, you know, to take their point of view, I mean, such a person, there's something wrong with them, or you know, I mean, they don't. There's no way that eternal torture can be in any way regarded as a proportionate punishment for such a person. And as I say, that's in the sense of justice. But then if we say that God is not just just, he is all merciful, well, you know, I mean, where is that mercy? You know, as I say, it annoys me when people say, oh, it's emotional. Not at all. It's pure logic and reason. It's a complete contradiction.
Yes, it's logic and reason based on morality, and you know, morality is not, it's not emotion based when deciding your morality, or it shouldn't be anyway. So yeah, this whole emotional thing, and of course we heard it today, and I think Stops is working on a video with one of the apologist hijab. You've got to be sincere, and so this is the get out clause. Of course, if you investigate everything and you come to the conclusion, as you and I and the rest of the panelists have, that there doesn't seem to be any truth to this, then the last get out clause is, well, you're just not being sincere. You've got to come with a sincere heart.
Again, just to be, you know, the devil's advocate, even if somebody is insincere, do they deserve to be eternally tortured over and over again without end? That's insane.
Yes, although there are Muslims who will say yes, they are. They've had the truth has been given to them. But then, as you quite rightly pointed out, if it's not a mortal sin or even a sin, then on what basis is that?
I don't think any reasonable person, you know, can say that eternal torture is a reasonable punishment, let alone proportionate.
Well, I don't think any torture is for an omniscient being. That
absolutely. I mean, in all civilized societies, we've banned torture, and we're against torture. I mean, the only people who carry out torture are the most, you know, sadistic tyrants and dictators, or appalling criminals. You know, this is something that we do as human beings. But I mean, God would not only torture people, he will actually eternally torture them without end. I think I mentioned this once before, that I heard about this dictator in Asia, one of the former Soviet republics, Muslim countries, where there was some Muslim rebels trying to implement the Khilafah. They were, I think, from Hezb Tahrir, and they were arrested by this dictator, and they were boiled in a huge vat of oil, boiling vat of oil. And I thought, what an awful, disgusting creature this dictator must be. To what sort of a human being could he be to drop these human beings into this boiling vat of oil and kill them? But at least they died. God will not only do that, he will do it over and over again and make them alive again, over and over again, without end.
Yes.
And that's
the argument there is, you knew this. It's your choice. You knew the rules. You were given the rules. You were given the instructions.
But that's nonsense. Because, I mean, what they're saying is that they believe it. So they believe it's really going to happen. So somehow we actually believe that this is actually going to happen. But we reject it. But that's nonsense. Anyone who rejects Islam is because we don't believe this is true. Anyone who actually believes that's true, that believes they're going to be burnt over and over again, well, as I say, they need mental health care, not punishment.
I don't think you'll have any argument from us on the panel here. It's surprising how, you know, some Muslims, will try to rationalize that. You know, because I've said on the panel, well, I've intimated it here, and I've said it elsewhere as well. You know, I have read a concept of a God which I think is entirely devoid of any of these moral problems, to say the least. Obviously, I would not argue for that God in the sense of it being true, because I don't have reasons that I could put forward as an atheist. However, there is a version of a God, and that God, for me, the only God that I could want to believe in, and if it existed, want to have some sort of relationship, would be an unconditionally loving God. That's the minimum bar. And of course, no Abrahamic God gets remotely close to that. In fact, it's the opposite end of that. You know, so, but again, you know, because as you said, and other panelists have said the same thing, I think it's people who are brought up into this. And I think there's a huge need for humans to have some sort of cosmic justice. The fact that somebody could, quote unquote, get away with it in this world is just unbearable for some people. And so, you know, the thought of cosmic justice is so, what's the word? Not refreshing, but it's so, there's justice there. There's got to be justice, because if they don't get it here, somebody murdered my family member or whatever, and they got away with it, but God will punish them. And there's some emotional, I don't know, just.
Well, religion has been so successful because of that. It's because it provides some sort of comfort, some sort of meaning in a world which can be quite cruel, can be very cruel, and can be quite absurd and make no sense. And it provides kind of, you know, when you go through awful traumas in life, where, you know, your cancer and all these sorts of things, it gives people something to hold on to, that there is a God who is going to punish those evil people who killed and raped your, you know, your children, that they're going to get their comeuppance, and that the people that you love who have died, you know, horribly, you're going to see them once again. It's a very attractive and strong thought, and religion has been very successful because of that.
Yes, now I think that is emotional reasons.
Yes.
Those,
well, exactly.
The emotional heartstrings.
Well, exactly. I mean, this is what annoys me about a lot of Muslim apologists who now try to turn the tables and say, "Oh no, it's you atheists who are being emotional." It's absolute nonsense. They're the ones who are being emotional. They're the ones. Religion is a purely emotional attachment.
Yes.
I'm not saying that all atheists and agnostics or you know, skeptics like myself are purely rational. Human beings are not purely rational creatures, that for sure, and we are all driven by, you know, reason as by emotion as well as reason. But without doubt, religion you know, wins in the Premier League of emotion.
Yeah, I agree. And even, you know, I've heard some of the Muslim converts say that, you know, they say they take an intellect, what was the term? I won't mention who, and some people will probably be able to guess, did an intellectual investigation and came to the conclusion Islam was true, and then was interviewed and actually said that the turning point for him was the thought of hell, and the fear of hell was the defining moment that made him decide that Islam was the true. And I can see why. I mean, they've outdone the Christians, and so, you know, if that hell is true, well, I'd rather believe this than the Christian hell, which presumably is not quite as bad. So,
I mean, the simple fact that the vast majority of Muslims were born in Muslim countries, the vast majority of Hindus were born in Hindu countries, the vast majority of Christians were born to Christian countries or Christian families, and so on. You know, shows you that it's not a simple matter of choice, a rational choice. And I know they talk about converts, but actually converts make up a tiny percentage. And if you look at the reasons why a lot of converts convert, it's usually because they've gone to a lovely Muslim country where they've you know, been treated, you know, wonderfully, or they've married into a Muslim family, or they've married, you know, there's an emotional reason, you know, to begin with. They may come up with rational reasons. In fact, they always do come up with rational reasons afterwards. But it's the emotional reason that actually led them there.
Yes, I agree, and that's always been my sort of, you know, claim, is that at some point every single religious person was not using their critical thinking faculties at some point in their life. They will have accepted it for not good reasons and then try to justify it afterwards. And they could come with, you know, some reasonable arguments, although I haven't. Reasonable is I guess in the eye of the beholder, but at some level, I think you're right that they have accepted it at some level for an emotional reason. I
used to work in an Islamic school for 15 years, and I knew a great many, and it was usually Muslim women who had converted to Islam because they had married a Muslim man from Morocco or some Arab country or Pakistan or wherever, and they, very often the man wasn't particularly practicing. They fell in love. They may have met in a pub or a bar or whatever. I knew of one who an Algerian chap who was actually playing in a band in a pub, and this girl had met him, and they fell in love, and they started having a relationship. And then he told her that he's a Muslim. She started looking into it. Started, because she wanted a serious relationship with him, started being more serious about it. Then she became very practicing, and this is a typical story which I've seen so many times. And she became very, very religious, and she started coming up with all the reasons why Islam was the best religion in the world. But of course, it all started from a relationship. An emotional reason and an emotional imperative to justify why it was right and why she should convert.
Yes, I agree. Yes, that's quite right. Sammy or Stops, is there anything you want to add? I've got another gentleman another ex-Muslim gentleman that wants to join us. I'm just going to see if I can add in the link as well.
No, I agree. It's mostly social. I see this. This is one of the benefits, actually, because as a Muslim, it doesn't matter where you go. If you come to a place, you can immediately find a mosque, and you will be welcomed, and you immediately have a social background, no matter where you are.
Yeah, I in my teens, I wasn't practicing, and my mum and dad, my dad was Muslim and my mum converted, mainly to please him, but they weren't particularly religious. And so we were Muslim really only in name. But when I got to the age of about 19, I started going to meetings in London, and you suddenly had these wonderful there were Malaysians, Africans, Arabs, Pakistanis, from all over the world. And you had it was like this wonderful big extended family, and they welcomed you, and you had this lovely food afterwards, biryani or couscous, and we were going on outings and so on. And there was this lovely emotional kind of feeling of warmth and being part of this lovely family. And I think that was, and is a big factor in many other people's kind of attraction towards Islam, that they suddenly become. I mean, Muslims are nice people. There's no two ways about it. I grew up, as I say, in a loving Muslim family, and I'm amongst a wonderful Muslim community, and they're very nice, welcoming,
and hospitable,
very generous. And they make you feel that you're really, special. And people like that. Everyone likes that, especially if you feel a little bit alienated from your own community. There's nothing else I particularly want to add at this moment. I was just, as I say, just happened to be listening.
Yes. No, that's good. Well, I'm always appreciative to have you in.
Excellent, thank you.
To have a sort of an agnostic, more spiritual perspective. So, no, that's good.
Nice to be with you guys.
As always. Sammy, is there anything you want to add there? Obviously, your first time on here, and I've really listened carefully to some of the things you said. You've made a lot of sense. You're very articulate as well, so that's always appreciated. So, as you said, you might not be able to join us, or you're likely not able to join us next week. So we will.
Yes, I'm sorry. I've got a bit of a family crisis at the moment, so I won't be able to. And that's sort of ongoing at the moment. So I really don't know when I will be free.
No, that's fair enough. Family comes first for sure, and wishing that it all goes well for Thanks. You. So yes, no. So pretty much, I'm just replying to a comment there. No, I appreciate it. Thank you so much. So this has been an excellent and interesting talk. I'm just going to. Oh, I see Sammy has. We've lost Sammy there. I'm not even going to chance it with these other people coming in. So they're muted. They can't do anything.
It's amazing how these people are so perverted that they get such pleasure out of going into a chat show and then bombing that, and then getting satisfaction out of that. That is, for me, I don't know, this is mind-boggling. I cannot get my head around the fact that somebody can get pleasure out of doing something like this. This is, for me, leaves me speechless.
Yes, well, you know, the mental level or lack thereof is just incredibly low. So those are the cases where there's a juvenile mentality, presumably in, we don't know, but I'm going to guess, you know, a non-juvenile body, but the mentality is such that, you know, and maybe that's.
Well, I can't imagine a 40-year-old woman doing this. I'm sorry.
No, it's unlikely. I agree. You know, you would suggest that it's probably, you get the odd woman, I guess, but very likely a male, and most likely a younger one at that.
Unfortunately, it's always the most militant or extreme who make the loudest noises, and they frighten everyone else into silence, and they frighten the majority of decent Muslims into silence as well. You know, because they literally do scare people with the threats and violence, and so they seem to come to the top, and I think it's a shame, because it gives a distorted image of Muslims, because not all Muslims are like that, and as I say, the majority of Muslims are good, decent people.
Yes, and that's why I'm reasonably careful to say some Muslims when we talk about whatever it is we're talking about, because I've met them. Obviously, you say you used to be one, your family used to be. I've met some in Speaker's Corner, quite happily live next door to them, and that sort of thing. But you're right; it's the smaller minority that are very vocal. There are wider minorities that believe in unpleasant things.
Yeah.
But there's a number of ones, and that's not something to forget as well. That there are.
That's true.
Yeah. So guys, I think if you're all good with that,
let's leave it. Yeah,
I think we'll call that one. I want to thank Hassan for his brief and surprise guest appearance. Thanks as always to Stopspamming for his seemingly endless knowledge on these topics as well. Thanks to all of you that have viewed as well. I don't think there's going to be an after show here. There are other links that people can join and so forth. I think the other gentlemen here are tired, as am I, on this particular link anyway, and I need to go and sort out this video now. So thank you so much to Hassan, to Stops, to all the viewers. We will see you next Friday. We will post what will be going on for that show. Until then, good night. Thank you, and bless you in whatever way is good for you.
Good night.
Good night. We'll all pray for you.